I had a lot of shame in my life. I had a lot of, if I don't do this, I am not worthy, not making it to the NFL. I lived this identity crisis of shame and guilt. Those came from childhood kind of developmental programs of you're seen when you accomplish. And so I've developed through these and uncovered these things in myself. Shame and guilt don't really operate as a serving purpose for me anymore. The shame doesn't exist because I give myself permission to want things that I want, things that I desire, not from someone else's expectation. And you can't learn these things in a textbook at all.
Whether you're looking for inspiration, guidance, or simply a moment of reflection, you're in the right place. This is Wisdom Stripes. Welcome to the Wisdom Stripes podcast, where we explore the profound journeys of individuals who've emerged from life's challenges with hard-earned wisdom and resilience. I'm your host, Meg Tuohey, and I'm thrilled to share that this podcast is brought to you by the transformative program, the Wisdom Lab. If you're feeling stuck in painful patterns, desperately seeking a breakthrough, and yearning for the tools to shatter emotional barriers and reclaim your power, the Wisdom Lab is your answer. In just 4 hours, you'll discover how to tap into your inner wisdom, turn confusion into clarity, and unlock the profound personal growth you've been craving. No more band-aid solutions or surface-level advice. This is about deep, lasting transformation from the inside out. Ready to embark on this life-changing journey? Head to the show notes for an exclusive link to learn more. Let's unleash your wisdom together. Hello and welcome to Wisdom Stripes. My name is Meg Tuohey, and today we're welcoming Brad Clifford to the podcast. Brad is the founder of Elevation Health, a company that promotes comprehensive health outcomes, including preventative measures in the health, wellness, and the anti-aging space. Overcoming health challenges, including a shoulder injury as a college athlete and as an adult, Brad preaches the combination of psychology, physiology, and relationships and their impact on health outcomes. A self-described philomath, or person who loves to learn and study, Brad joins me to discuss how his company is transforming health in a personalized, science-backed way for his clients. Brad, welcome to Wisdom Stripes, your no-nonsense, fierce fairy godparents, turning pain and confusion into clarity and confidence. Brad, we always start with the same question for our guests, and that is, what wisdom would you like a listener to come away with today?
After this conversation, I would love for someone to really, truly embrace and empower that all things are accomplished through one secret, and that's that you put yourself first and you love yourself first.
I think everybody understands that on a high level, but I feel like what we're going to do today is actually unpack what that actually means and how you organize yourself in a way to be able to have that experience. Yeah. So could you share with us a specific experience or battle scar from your journey that you think was the seed for this wisdom that you now own, you embody, and you live? Where did it start, this understanding, this wisdom?
Yeah, so I was a collegiate athlete at one point in my life, and during that time, you get really kind of inundated of building a life around what a lot of other people say to you, and they kind of regiment for you. And so you kind of develop a process of externally validating your world. And through that external validation of coaches and opinions and things like that, you can come to a place where you have to get really serious about understanding, what makes people tick, yourself included. And so for me, what happened is I came near to death at one point with a particular situation, emergency situation, where I almost lost my life. I had a psoas abscess in my hip. And when that happened, I had to have emergency surgery that I was in the hospital for about a week. I had a PICC line in my arm. It was about a 2-week process of some of the most intense antibiotics that you can get, lost about 30 pounds. And it put a real damper of my identity of, who I was, especially to other people. And when that was kind of taken away, I had to come face to face for the first time in my life with this connotation of life can end. And what does that mean? and then also the frame of who I thought I was and who I thought I was to other people can end. And the reactions to that event of, people turning away that I thought were close to me and people leaning in that were close to me really opened my eyes to what, relationships mean, what my value to myself meant, and overcoming, these really deep kind of philosophical challenges, which is the loss of life and the loss of identity. And so those two things helped me really early on in my life start this kind of development of a psychology, which took years to go through other events that would build scars and calluses, if you will, to my soul, of developing this true understanding through experience that everything's internal and nothing is external that isn't internal first. And so for half of my life, I lived in an externally referred life. And for the back half of my life, it's been 100% internally referred. And that is a process when I say that self-love is the one thing that really transcends all things for people, both when you interact with another person, but especially yourself. It really is the secret to all things is this self-understanding of love and what that truly means, which is putting yourself in your best interests. If you can truly understand that, not because someone else told you, but because it's coming from you, it's going to layer on a life that you could never imagine for, if you're living externally referred.
So I utterly understand what you're saying, and it is one of the principles that I teach and have taught for many, many, many years. What I am really curious about is you've kind of split it into two things. One is before, which goes up to college, and it was a life where, as a vulnerable human whose brain hadn't fully finished developing, right? 25 ish is the time when the brain is
Yes.
finally online. So I'm guessing that's under 25 college level. So in that 25 years, am I correct in hearing that that was a time where you had influence in and you were responding to that influence and creating a life that matched what you thought was what was required of you? You had this injury, and during that process, there was this some reckoning of, hang on a second, who am I and how do I want to live, and what am I and how do I want to express that? Have I got that right? Sort of two halves.
You're yeah, you're spot on those two pieces. Yes. And when you can start to frame that, I think it starts when you're in college, but the under 25 mark is really important. The development of the brain, clinically speaking, too, is part of that. Yeah.
Well, let's do that in a minute, because here's my real interest in what you're telling me. My real interest is a question around that first 25 years and whether it could have been any different environmentally. So, thinking about your family, your community, the leaders around you, and who you were as a human, could that have been different and it wasn't? Or was that just actually what it's like for most people?
I think both can be correct. I think both the question that you're proposing, I think could be answered yes to both. I think that it could have been different, but also I think most people have a very similar structure because the reality is we're transposing identities that we embody, and so I look at my parents as completely beautiful people, but also very imperfect, and I also view the people in my communities now at this point as imperfect humans as well. And so I think the frame of community is that you're a byproduct, especially when you're impressionable and you're young and you're developing. Your values and your desires are framed off of community and influence, and so you get these embedded programs when you're a very young, individual and impressionable to what, things that are very binary, because we're very binary creatures logically. And so you get these frames of like good and bad, or this is important, this is not important, type of structures that the community and your immediate family can kind of impress upon you. And there's layers to that. There's spiritual layers. There's ideals for lifestyle and pursuit of finance and economy and business, and then there's relational and love and development in those kind of loving relationships, and then interpersonal just friendships. And so all those things that are interconnected and embedded to you like an operating system in a computer, you grow up just kind of automatically, especially when you're not aware of this, automatically responding to life, which is kind of this external process. Is you respond to life off of the stimulus that you're going through all these value sets and structures and programs that you've been impressed upon by your community leaders and the people that you aspire to be like as a young person. And so, from my experience in college, and it wasn't the last time, it was just the first time I had to come to face with those two things. One is that life is, you don't know when life's going to end. One, that part. And then two, when my identity that I had structured for the first time, for 23 years, I was removed of that identity for a moment and came to terms with, if I wasn't this, what am I? Kind of thing. And that is a pivotal moment, I think, for most people. They go through these events in life, and I think what was pivotal for me is um, it opened a crack in the door, but it didn't open the door all the way completely. It opened a crack, and I could see in. It's almost like you get a peek into Pandora's box for the first time, and you go, "Oh, there's something there," but I haven't really fully looked in there. And it took some time to go through about another 10-year process of other events that opened that door wider and wider and wider, to the point where you come face to face with this new reality, and you go, this is something that now I can't unsee, and therefore it's something that I want to share with other people. But also, it's something that truly transcends, development. I think that most people are looking for. They look for outside sources for development, but this level of development is really seeing inside yourself. And when you can get there to that point, you start understanding things like, oh, wow, that's interesting. I would not harm another person because it is harming myself. I would not intentionally, if I'm thinking about this correctly, I would not want to, do XYZ activity because it's really the same activity to myself. And I think that takes people time to really truly understand that. And for me specifically, the door opening was at 23 years old in college, and it ultimately led to another kind of 10-year process of fully not hiding from that door anymore, and really opening it wide to understand it and be face to face with it, that mirror.
So curious whether you feel like that's your life's work, is to explore this paradigm, or if this is one of your pillars of what you're here to do and teach and embody and experience.
It's one of my pillars personally, but what my avenue of passion. It's why I refer to myself as a philomath. Like the people that I love and I aspire to be like in many ways, maybe not all the ways, but many ways, are all individuals that are on this equal pursuit of the interconnectivity of all things. So Leonardo da Vinci is one of my Mount Rushmore of heroes, and he was the ultimate philomath. And there are people that are that I respect deeply and have relationships with, that I am inspired by from afar. Robert Edward Grant is one of those people that I, is a person that I deeply admire, and he's doing very similar work, but in his own pursuits of connecting all things together. And so, but for me, it's really, I think the light that I shine from a lighthouse standpoint is this true understanding of the human physiology and what that really means. And I think that the world has an idea of a separated connection between the brain center, the soul center, and then the meat suit. We talk about this meat suit and the physiology in very scientific terms, and they're not, I think, respected in the ways that most people should really see them as. And that's why that internal kind of referral and love is so important, is because the human biology is affected so much by someone, if we're just talking about nervous system just alone, by someone and other people influencing by that type of emotional energy. And so you can extend your life by having an internally loved process, but also a community of people that understand this too, and lift you up. That's something that's irrefutable in scientific data now with anti-aging and longevity medicine, is that social connections is one of the key pillars of extension of life. And so, that's part of it. And so I wanted to take an approach from one of my pillars of really respecting that world and helping communicate that so it's more relatively understood by more people, that it's a part of the process to treat your body, that most people think it's like a magic pill, or I just do this incessant amount of like exercise and pain and all these emotions that are attached to it, where it's quite the contrary. It's when you truly love yourself and you truly understand this energy of love, things like exercise or things like nutrition or things like biological influence that you can do through many advancements in science, are things that are a great thing for you. They're this reframe of positivity that you're going to have not only such a better experience now, but in the future as well. So that's one of my pillars. But I think that my life lessons have allowed me to be a voice of power in this particular field that I'm in, to speak at it at a level that's both scientifically backed, but also from an impact of wisdom. That's why I love your show so much, is there's a wisdom element of it that you can't just read in a book. You've got to experience through yourself. And I myself have gone through both, a physical transformation, what would one consider a psychological transformation, but also, deep down on a personal level, it's a spiritual awakening and transformation as well.
If you were to be able to distill all of that knowledge and translate it into the most simplest of forms, what can a listener literally do today that would be different
Mhm.
to the way perhaps they've been thinking about their life and working in that space in up until now?
Yeah, I'll do two pieces of that. One on a personal level for people. I think it's when we are sensory beings. So clinically, scientifically speaking, we're sensory beings. This experience, touch, feel, taste, eyesight, all these things, sound. We're sensory beings, right? And so most of the time they're built for us, so that we protect ourselves. We're kind of, fight or flight. We're trying to protect ourselves with those senses. Um, but when you can lean in, and most people can relate to this, when you hug people, like especially someone that you really care about, if you hug someone, you have that sensory component of, you can smell them, you can feel them, tactile feedback, but also when I say this, you can feel deep down in your core that experience. And so that is something that's kind of an external example, but when was the last time you've done that with yourself, right? That's, when I'm kind of dumbing this down, this experience is like, when have you done that with yourself? And if you think about that realistically, most people can't really answer that correctly with what I just described. And so these sensory outputs, as something that's simple, for people, and I suggest this all the time, um, especially for men. Men tend to do this a little bit more, in my experience, than others. They tend to hide from themselves a little bit more. But if you sit with yourself for 15 minutes, looking at yourself in the mirror, there's a sensory component of making eye contact that, when you do that with yourself, opens a very unique door. And it can for people be uncomfortable. And for others, it can be really reassuring and reaffirming of things. But for some, it can be uncomfortable. And there's components of my life where that's been uncomfortable. But even that simple practice of 15-minute eye contact, and not breaking that contact and sitting with yourself in a mirror, can unlock a space in the doorway that allows people to go, okay, I can't now unsee what I've just seen, literally and figuratively. And so that simple experience helps the door get open more and more. And then, things that people preach that some may feel is like kind of woo-woo-y is just, simple meditative states, sitting with yourself, um, with the sensory feeling of that feeling I was describing in the hug, and sitting with yourself without visual stimulus is something that, again, opens that door more and more. And I think when people start practicing that more regularly, they can start asking questions in a different non-logical sense. In this, neuroscience talks about this. The logical brain only operates with hundreds of bits per second, but the subconscious mind in the subconscious brain operates at millions times billions of operation power, more so than we can comprehend. So you're in that kind of space more, and you can ask yourself questions of, what I really desire, what do I really want, what do I really believe, what do I believe about myself, and those things, which allows people to have dialogue that most spend, myself, 32 years sometimes trying to get to, or, um, you know, 60, 70 years sometimes for people. And so that part of it allows yourself to truly understand, what these things, when I talk about self-love, really mean. Because when you go to that level, then you can start talking to yourself like, do I want to feel good? Do I want to move without pain? Do I want to, wake up in the morning with energy? And if you're in that space and you're honest with yourself, not a single person that I've ever encountered would answer no to those questions. So then, from that place, when we're talking now about clinical science or the work that I'm doing, you start measuring yourself versus yourself. So you stop measuring yourself from your starting line to someone else's finish line, which a lot of people do, is they go, that person's, vain, or this person's like self-centered because they care about what they eat, or this person's, there's no reason to be in shape, or who wants to live long anyways, right? These are all external referred energy sources that come from deep cynicism and criticism, because it's not something that you would actually have internal dialogue about and answer, with cynicism or criticism. So when you can get someone to that place, they and be okay with, hey, my starting line's here. You start measuring your starting line versus what that future that you really want, those desires and questions that you can answer and go, I really do want to feel good. I do want to move with my companion for the next, 50 years and feel great and be operational and do these things. And then you start going, okay, well, what does that take and what does that not take? And that's where what I do in our company does. We start eliminating what it takes and what it doesn't, so we can help people blueprint that out. But as they go through this, they can then start building their finish line. And I talk about it from a transformational sense of, we call them him and her. I use those taglines because people can name him or her however they want. It could be Brad 2.0 or highest version of Brad, or whatever. You start to associate with that future version of yourself that you've had this internal dialogue with, that really uncovers these desires and things that you truly want, not that mom, dad, friend, coworker, the media, social media tells you, but you. And then you start working against that referral process. Oh my goodness, that's where all the magic happens. Because then you start going, and I made an Instagram post about this the other day, is, if we're just talking about clinically speaking, I'm in the 98th percentile for metabolic syndrome. So essentially what does that mean is I'm in the worst category of human life for metabolic dysfunction potential and mitochondrial dysfunction potential and obesity, all these health risks that are just predisposed in these type of categories of people. So 2% of the population is worse than me. So, but I don't operate like that, and I don't look like that. And if I were to really kind of uncover and go deep layered into why, It's because I know what the science entails, but more importantly, I know what now I want for myself. And I know what I would like for my future and the desires that I want to operate from. And it comes only from a place of love for the person that I want to be all day in, day out, but also in the future. And I can't harm myself by operating like that. And so allowing myself to be obese would be an operational component that would harm myself now, not wanting something like that. I want to lift my children when I'm old. I want to be with my companion when I'm old and swimming in the ocean and all these things that are really important to me. But that's not, if you look at kind of the science, the health community, there's a lot of people yelling at people to let, be tough or be jacked or, take this pill because you robotically will live forever. Like most people don't connect with that. What they're connecting to is they need to have an emotional connection, but a lot of times that emotional connection is to someone else's finish line, like I'm talking about. And when you can help bring that inside to their starting line and their future self finish line, that's where the real magic and transformation of psychology, physiology, and spirituality can really, take off.
I feel like what you're describing is an adjacent to the work that I do. So the thread that we share, and I might describe this differently to you, so let me test that I've got this right, is when you can strengthen the relationship with self such that you can vision into your later years and who you want to grow into, who the essence, the heartprint of you are, can bloom into. And when you understand what that is, because the relationship is strong between you and yourself, then everything else lines up in terms of what is the next right step so that I can have the outcome of blooming into the very best version of who I am, not what is imprinted as other options or other people's versions of this. And so therefore it is actually easier to
Yes.
exercise because you hold dear the idea of gardening in your 90s or riding a horse in your 90s or caring for your loved one in your 90s. You are able then to do the work each day that is required so that outcome can be probable or possible. And without that connection, you do not have the same level of attunement or buy-in to doing the things that are required every day, and it becomes a chore or a burden in terms of I should do this because if I do this, then they say this will happen and that sounds good. So you're really looking for that why. Is that right?
You're spot on, and people are moved and motivated by two different things, and you've described this really well. One is this actionable, I call it love, but you can associate other terms and labels for that, but like encouragement or excitement, like labels like that. But usually shame and guilt is associated with this like manipulation where it's like you've got to be convinced to do it and it's painful. So there's pain and love, and so there's spectrums of this thing. And so when you get to if you get moved by shame and guilt, that may be a good way for some people to get to a starting line, but it will never be the fulfillment of what anyone needs to get to a finish line ever. And so when you can get to that place of the why that you just described, then those actionable steps become almost like automatic. So a lot of people talk about like discipline and motivation, right? But the real kind of secret to those both of those things is desire. And desire usually comes, and this is part of that. What I said in your beautiful question at the beginning, what could I leave people with is this self-love, but also part of self-love is forgiveness and permission. And I think we wait so many years of our life to forgive ourselves for things that we've self-imposed by just some external factor. But we also wait so much of our life to give ourselves permission to receive love, to embrace love, to show love. And I think when you finally go, permission's not coming from anyone anywhere else. I need to really dig into this and understand this. And you get empowered. That desire becomes, again, back to the motivation discipline thing. When you've given yourself permission that it's okay to be healthy, if it's okay to treat your companions, with respect and honor. It's okay to, not force yourself to be around situations that are going to harm yourself. Your life changes because those daily actions build into blooming, like you said, into that future version, of your highest self. And I think those two things can be difficult for people to, one, come to head with, but also work through permission and forgiveness, which are the front lines and gatekeepers to true desire, in my opinion.
I don't disagree. So I would like to unpack the wisdom of the relational build that is required, because I think we both agree
Mm,
that in order to access the potential of the human heart print, we need to build a relationship with ourselves. Yeah. So that's the premise of my work, the premise of your work, and they go in complementary ways, right? So let's
yeah.
discuss the literal how. So I was going to say
Mm,
it's you and me, but it's not. It's me and it's you and you. And if we're at the beginning of this journey, like perhaps many people are, we're somewhere in the beginning, then maybe most of the time we don't mind ourselves. And most of the time we're able to access general ideas of what we want our life to look like. The invitation from the wisdom of this conversation is what would happen if you were able to strengthen that connection with self and you were able to work in the space of reduction of shame, genuine, and increasing of forgiveness. And then I want to pick apart, I want to pass out the actual how. So I'm hearing mirror work, I'm hearing eye
mm,
contact, eye connection. I love that. The thing that I
mhm,
think we skip over when we teach this, though, is the distress of the intolerance of that connection, the unfamiliarity of it, and therefore the
mhm,
pressure of trying to do something that feels very vulnerable, isn't well modeled, and also feels slightly dangerous to our nervous systems. So let's unpack the
mm.
actual first steps of building that relationship, because that is the gateway to everything else we're talking about.
Yeah, really, really good segue. I think it's a desire. So most people focus on the things that they don't want in their life, which, can be, part of this process. But I think it can start with a simple question of, instead of answering this question in the way that I'm about to propose it with, well, I don't like this, or I don't like that, or I hate this about myself, right? Those all don't wants are not channels to what we're trying to get to. So I think even starting to get curious with many things is a great first step. Curiosity leads to possibility. And so when you can give yourself permission to be curious and just get exploratory, that's why children, when they're playing, they get so creative and they get goofy, and then your parents say, "Hey, stop acting like that," and they go, "Oh, right." It's because they're so curious. And so when you can get into that playful state, so I always say, do things that get you away from the logical, brain more often. Like, it's highly meditative to walk. And people, when you go on long walks, 20-minute plus walks, it's going to be beneficial health wise for you, but also it's going to help you get more associated with kind of a meditative rhythmic state. And you can start asking a question with the sole purpose answering of, what do you want? Not, I don't want. You can start exploring kind of those things. So for me, those are some of the first suggestions: is getting curious and giving yourself permission to be curious, is a great first step. And then asking yourself questions like, what do I want? And then as you come head with some of the uncomfortability that you're kind of describing that may arise, it's, taking a break. It's just like a muscle, muscle overnight, you don't become very strong overnight. It's the same thing with this type of processes. You have to become familiar with this type of process and this type of conversation. But that simple question of what do I want, and refusing to answer that with I don't like, or this person does, or I don't want this thing, but just strictly speaking, I want this, I like this, I would like more of this, allows you to kind of explore that world a little bit easier um, for many people. But I'd love to hear kind of your point on, how you think that people can get more curious, because I have my particular ways that I have witnessed in myself and many others kind of go through this road, but I'd love to hear your point of view on this.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's really fun. So I feel like there is a distress that comes as you start to build that relationship with self. It is not a easy path to start, particularly when you start it later in life. Perhaps it wasn't well formed in your early 20s, and then you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and you're like, hang on a second, like, where am I and who am I and where do I want to grow to and what is important, and am I living a life that matches me? That's like a normal midlife process, and it's reasonable. It's not unreasonable to have that process. As you start to become curious in who you really are, there is often some reckoning, and there's often some discomfort and fear or worry, or also unfamiliarity. And we know the brain doesn't like unfamiliar things, it perceives them as a threat. So the unfamiliarity of strengthening that relationship automatically, I think, puts us on the back foot as humans in general, let alone beautiful humans that have come from a background of trauma or who have not had an easy life, where they've had more adverse, perhaps childhood experiences, and are coming to this later in life. And that is a lot of us. A lot of us are starting to have the space and time to start waking up. And that is a beautiful thing. It is also a scary thing. And so, how do you strengthen safety and tolerance to be able to pursue the expansion of that connection with self? Is the question. And the answer is we have to make it familiar so that the brain doesn't get in the way with its worry. And I think finally, the other piece I'd like to share is that when we make a new friend, it takes 60 hours to be together. So it's reasonable that it's going to take 60 hours of thoughtful connection with self to become friends and to not be afraid or triggered or worried or distressed. So this is not a like one and done. This is a relationship you need to cultivate over time, because you're the first one that met yourself and you're the last one that'll know what you think. And so we have ourselves this whole time, and yet we don't thoughtfully strengthen that relationship. And not because we're bad people or we're wrong. I think because it hasn't been the nature of society to teach us this until now. Now is the perfect time, I think. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a I've never heard 60 hours to develop a friendship. That is one a great thing, I think, for people to really listen to and meditate on, because if you think about that friendship development, most of the time, the first time, let's say you have this desire to build a friendship with someone. Let's just plant that as the starting point. I see this person and I would like positively to have a relationship with this person. They seem like a great person to build a friendship with. It starts from this place of not fight or flight that you're describing, or uncomfortable feelings that are rising. It's only starting from this very curious place, a very open place, and there's a tension to this person too. And if you think about it, how do you build good friendships? Well, it's a combination. I mean, let's even take away friendship, but any relationship, there is a level of investment on your behalf and their behalf to build something, a structure. And so most great, relationships, being romantic or friendships, is a combination of like 100% and 100% commitment to that relationship. And so when I hear you talk like that, I think I'm reaffirming, even hearing you speak in this way, for what my belief systems are, is that for yourself. So now imagine these 60 hours that Meg just described. And with also this understanding, most, a relational scientist or psychologist in the science analyzation really have landed to this kind of like 100%, 100% thing for really strong relationships to be committed. That means that you have to put 100%, like almost 200% commitment into yourself with 60 hours. And for, people hearing that, I think most, if I'm being honest, most people don't even know where to start to do that. And, they're really focused on treating everyone else well and doing these things for my children or my spouse or my neighborhood. And they end up, 40, 30, 50, 60 years later, empty inside because they haven't figured out yet, until we all do, that true connection and true like flourishing really starts and gets driven from this endless energy if you can connect to your core self. And that's why you can see, I'm sure you've been around this quite a bit, and I resonate. I can feel your energy even virtually, over this call, but you can feel people that when people label it as like vibrating differently. And whenever I've been around people that vibrate differently and in this vibrational kind of, call it an elevated state or an energetic state, you can feel kind of that energy. It's because they have a really good connection to self. Every single person that I've ever encountered with this type of high vibrational energy, is they have a relationship with self. They're not perfect, but they have a connection to self. And so that 60 hours is really powerful. I think that's a great starting point for people, but I also want them to understand what is required of that investment is 200%, probably more so than anyone else in your life. There should be a focused, energetic commitment to looking and treating that person curiously, with high intentions, great intentions, wanting to get familiar with and support and build their dreams, right? But it's you. It's yourself. And so I love that answer. That's an incredible answer. I've never heard anyone talk about the amount of hours it takes to build a new friendship, but that's a beautiful kind of depiction of, really, I think, the starting point for an internal kind of connection to yourself. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Thank you. I feel like the piece that I am actually writing a book about, and also feel like it's an important piece of wisdom that we haven't touched on, so I'll be curious to know your thoughts on this, is that my experience and belief is that all of us have access to our heart print, that kind of inner wise voice, this wisdom that lives within. And when we are attuned to that sort of centered part of ourselves and we build our life from there, we want to have our inside match our outside, and that is a successful life in a nutshell. The piece I want to pull out for this conversation is that humans have all the feelings and all the parts. And when we are building that relationship with self, we want to be really thoughtful about the part we're building it with. Because the part that we need to build it with is that wisdom part, that essence, that who you really are. And the parts we want to be thoughtful about, but still befriend and lead, are the other parts that have been splintered off or hurt or harmed or abandoned or misunderstood. Those are all parts of us as well. There's a little bit of wisdom in them. They are trying to keep us safe. But that's not the part we want to develop in this relationship, because those parts are going to choose things that don't necessarily allow us to express our full heart print. They are the parts that are like, pay attention to me. I'm hurting. I'm worried about you. If, I'm afraid for you. I want to make that person go away. And I don't like this thing about that over there. And those things have some wisdom in them, right? Like there's 5% in there that we
Hmm.
want to learn from. And the rest we actually need to work with in a different way, which we don't have to do now. But I feel like the most responsible next part of this conversation is to describe the part of you that we're trying to connect you with, that attunement piece.
Hmm.
So, how would you describe that version that we're trying to find?
Oh, that's a deep question. I can only answer parts of this with experience to stay in the theme of this. But you know, I love that you said like respect and almost I don't know if it was the right word, but like you honor those parts, even though they don't serve you the future self, right? I think that that is absolutely necessary, and I'm very grateful that you brought that up too, because listening to you speak, I'm just going, yes, yes, I accept all these things that she's saying. And I'll just use myself for example as, I had high expectations of myself, but their expectations kind of formed by external processes. And so when I got to college, it was a huge feat. But for myself at the time, it was not the end goal. The end goal was to play football professionally, and that didn't end up happening. And so that part of me was driven off of this relentless uh, piece of myself, which is I don't know how to quit. I just don't have that in me at all. And that part allowed me to really accomplish some really great things, even at the detriment of, pain and time, and, some relationships and things like that. And that part of me that doesn't know how to quit, I associated with really intimately, and I had a really strong relationship with that, and it allowed me to accomplish many great things. But as I have evolved and realized that about myself, I think what I'm glad you're bringing this up is if I continued on with that intimate, deep relationship, and that was it, was just I don't quit, and I'll use these labels, but grind and work hard and push through. They serve a purpose at a time, but my structure of those purposes was all encompassing at all times. And so as I evolved as a person, I realized that I didn't need to go unconsciously searching for hard things to keep happening to me, to reprove over and over and over again that I don't quit and that I can work through these hard things and grind through. And so as I've evolved, I can go, this splintered off piece of me that now believes that I can leverage a tool as it's needed because I have better vision and understanding of this tool. It doesn't mean that it's operational 100% of my life. And honestly, most of the time, I'm looking for more effortless and smooth, peaceful energy, the more prioritized portions of myself as I've connected with myself. And so I think that has allowed me to build an honest relationship with my internal self on these pieces of me to go, that's not a shameful element. It doesn't mean that I'm bad. It doesn't mean that, if I did something other way, things would have been XYZ. I can look at it and appreciate, the great parts of me that did many things came from this, operational belief and operational part of me. But moving forward in my life, I have learned that I don't need that the predominant amount of my time. And so it doesn't mean that it goes away, but it's served its purpose and I can see it. But also, and I think more importantly, in the parts that you're talking about, that was the first thing to come to mind. I had a lot of shame in my life. I had a lot of, if I don't do this, I am not worthy of certain parts of expectation setting. And so back to kind of the goal of not making it to the NFL, I lived this identity crisis of shame and guilt because I didn't get there because of those expectations. And, those came from childhood kind of developmental programs of you're seen when you accomplish. XYZ components from the community. And so as I've developed through these and uncovered these things in myself, shame and guilt don't really operate as a serving purpose for me anymore. And the shame doesn't exist because I give myself permission to want things that I want and things that I desire, not from someone else's expectation. And so there's nowhere else that I'm looking like I've let someone else down. Instead, it's this internal pull of um, layered upon layered understanding and curiosity being developed and shown to me through every experience. And my old self would have looked at many things as like losses or shameful events, where now my new operating process with myself is most of the time I'm coming through a place where maybe it didn't go the way that I perceived it would go, and going, oh, you know what? This is because I needed to learn this thing for myself because I'm so curious. And obviously, I didn't have the detailed information before, which is a completely different way to operate. But that lens has totally transformed all of my relationships. I'm more empathetic to my spouse, to my parents, to my friends, and things like that. And judgment of my expectations don't settle in nearly as much because I then realize they're operating from their own processes and programs that aren't me, right? They don't really have much to do with me other than I'm sharing an experience with them, and so that allows me to operate different. But I think that I love what you said at the beginning is just the wisdom elements of this are so important, and you can't learn these things in a textbook at all.
No, it's the discussion and the breakdown, and then the examples where you start to see it in other people. And then you can have some kind of understanding of, okay, so if I start the process for this building this relationship with self, I can expect I'll feel uncomfortable. I can expect that I might go into fight, flight, or freeze. I can expect it's going to take some time. I can expect it's going to bring great value. And I can expect I'm going to learn a lot. And that then, that wisdom that transfers from
Yeah.
this conversation to the beautiful listeners out there means that they can, if they want to, start to feel into what does that mean for me? Who am I? What is my unique heart print? How would I like to build or scaffold that relationship? How would I like to talk to myself? Because actually, that is one thing I was going to ask you. And that is, I can hear your inner language to yourself has a lot of self-compassion, and it's firm and gentle and strong. And I wonder if you could share with us some typical thoughts you have. Let's not choose like everyday thoughts because it's easy to be kinder to yourself and things are working. Let's choose the things where you tripped over and it was because you were tired and you didn't pick your feet up properly, and you tripped over and you hurt your knee. What are you going to say to yourself automatically?
Yeah, I can use. I like your example, but I can relate to it really intimately with this other example. Yeah, I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, it's the same component because it's a really good one. Um, I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and so in Jiu-Jitsu, you're trying to submit another person. You're trying to harm them, if you will. And my old self, if I would get harmed in football or like an aggressive moment, like pain, you trip on your knee or you do something wrong, I would be really hard on myself. I would be, what an idiot, in my internal dialogue. Like I can't believe you tripped. Like you're, and now everybody's looking at you wrong. And now everybody thinks this and this, that, and the other, right? And that's related to the pain elements too. But now, the pursuit that I do personally is jujitsu. And so if someone is submitting me and they submit me, I actually laugh. I giggle. I laugh about it. And when I stand up, my internal dialogue is so curious. Like I'm laughing because I'm laughing that I got put in that position to have had that done. And I'm laughing because I'm like, oh, I needed to see that. Like then I turn on that curious side of my brain and go, that pursuit for that. So, to then go back to your example, if you trip, fall, hurt your knee, my internal dialogue is laughter. I use a joyful response mechanism that I've embedded in myself because it allows me to be curious, like, oh my gosh, well, maybe I didn't tie my shoes. That's so funny. I didn't tie my shoes today. Like, I love that about myself, that I was so busy doing so many awesome things that I forgot to tie my shoe, and I tripped and I hurt my knee. And oh, if I hurt my knee, then you know what? I can't run for the next week, but you know what I can do? I can sit with my daughter like a lot more, right? So those if you can reshape, joy and curiosity more in your life and less judgment in those real time hard kind of situations, or you know the they usually come from an expectation, right? They come from expectation, and it comes from relationships too. Like, oh, they didn't write me a card on my birthday. Well, they must hate me. They must think that I'm the worst thing ever, and everybody else is more important to them, right? That's one way of thinking. Whereas kind of a more joyful way of thinking is like, oh my gosh, they're so busy. I wonder what was going on in their life. Or compassionately, I wonder what was going on where they didn't even have enough time to do that. Like, I know they love me because they're sharing time with me in all these other ways. So I wonder what's going on in their life. And then you can have, these type of conversations that come from curiosity. So seeking curiosity instead of judgment is really a superpower, and even in that example that you just outlined too.
And I do not mind at all that you chose a different thing. I don't mind. I feel like the last, like, responsible thing to do, though, is to acknowledge the human in all of us. So this is not a toxic positivity
Mm.
rewrite of mental scripts that we're talking about. And I know that, even though I don't know Brad, I already know that he and I have the same philosophy, because the humans, they do think in downward spirals when they're tired or hungry or sad or mad or haven't drunk enough or rested enough. It is a really natural human response to do rumination, defensiveness, blame shifting, the four horsemen, criticism, contempt, stonewalling, etc. That's really normal. Brad is not saying, people, that you just override those things, because if you're in those spaces mentally and emotionally, there's information there that we need you to attune to in the relationship you're building with yourself and take care of. And then it's much easier to shift into the space of a gentle, self-compassionate inner voice. So I do just want to highlight that. And you're nodding at me like you agree. So I just want to confirm. You can disagree. That could be fun. We could talk about that.
Yeah, life is a marathon, and so no such thing as overriding human natures. We all respond these ways. It's just how can you override your processing power of them to be a leverage of, and again, I love that you say toxic positivity. We all feel anger. We all feel fear. We all feel these human elements. We all do. There's not a single person that doesn't, but it's the reframe response system, and that comes from the relationship. But no one's perfect, and no one's immune to, I'll use the label of messing up. We're not batting 1,000. That doesn't exist. Doesn't
The
exist.
human condition, we're very fallible. And the goal is 80% of the time you can live in a way that Brad's describing, because it is reasonable that 20% of the time you're having a very human meat sack experience that's normal. So that feels like a responsible thing to say at the end.
Yes, yeah, it's very appropriate and very needed.
I can't help it. I'm a responsible person. So, Brad, I have one last question for you. It's the end of an evening, and metaphorically, we're gathering on the perfect
Mm,
porch. It's a lovely night, a little bit of twilight's happening.
mm,
I like to have some fireflies. We don't have them in Australia, so I like to put some of them in. And we've all got a drink or two of our
okay.
favorite thing, and I don't mind what that is. It's just your favorite. And we've got a cozy place to sit. And it's you and me, and then there's a space for our listener. And we're all just like doing our
Mhm.
last kind of conversation before we retire for the night. My question to you is, what last things would you like to leave us with so that we get the benefit of your hard earned wisdom?
What a well-framed environment, and what a well-framed question. Um, One of the most powerful questions that I ask myself on the daily is, when did I decide? That question elicits a whole bunch of curiosity for me. So anytime I come in front of something that I want and want to continue to pursue, that hits resistance, I ask myself that specific question. In the second half of that, in the same spirit, is that all of us are innately programmed from when we were children that the limits of possibility are from what we can see and what someone else has taught us. And so, what I would like on the back end of that question is for people to understand this concept of endless possibilities. And a simple way to kind of describe this in a very rudimentary kind of fifth grade level is if you're sitting on a chair, and if I was in the room with you, Meg, and we both were having this conversation, and I said to you, "What is not the chair?" You would tell me that table behind you, that picture behind you. You'd start looking around the room and all these things. But if I were to say, close your eyes and think outside of this house and everything else, start expanding that viewpoint. I said, what is not the chair? You'd say the stars, the moon. You start going upwards and outwards, right? And expand this rigid kind of frame that just the eyes alone can do. So leaving, and we're sitting here, I'm drinking a Coke Zero because that's my cheat kind of drink. I love them. I would say that to the listener is say, get curious with yourself and ask yourself when you decided that, because that will elicit a whole bunch of curiosity. And when you start exploring possibilities of what your life could be, think about the things that are not the chair that you're looking at in your life. Start getting creative and thinking beyond what has been either exposed to you in your environment, from the people from in your environment, or yourself, those limits, and start thinking about the things that could be on the back end of possibility. That's where the 4-minute mile was first obtained. Us as humans, we set these limits and they continue to get broken. And I want to live in that space with people. And I want to encourage people to live in that space, is that when you love yourself fully and you can get curious with it, there's endless possibility on the back end of it.
That's so beautiful. And what a lovely gift to leave our listeners with as they drink their preferred beverage of choice. And I love that yours is a Coke Zero. I think mine is a turmeric, lemon, ginger, honey concoction. But I would probably, knowing me, have more than one drink at that table. I'm a person who likes a wide variety of beverages. So that's amazing. And so, Brad, as we wrap up today's episode of Wisdom Stripes, I'd really like to thank you for sharing this space with me today. I've loved the back and forth and the co-creation of the conversation. So thank you very much for being here with us today.
Likewise.
Yeah, it's been a joy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been awesome.
What a joy. In today's podcast, Brad shared his wisdom around being a person who has built a deep and lasting relationship with self, and use that relationship to explore his interests in being a founder, the healthcare system, and his personal journey to wellness. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and leave a comment. If you'd like to keep updated, please follow me at Meg Tuohey Official on Instagram, and you can follow Brad at Brad Clifford. Until next time, thank you so much for listening. I am Meg Tuohey, and this is Wisdom Stripes. Thank you for listening to this episode of Wisdom Stripes. Follow me on @MegTuoheyOfficial and leave a comment and review. I'm looking forward to meeting you here next time on Wisdom Stripes.